Good evening. My name is Heidi Krill. I'm calling to order the Active Recreation Assets Working Group for Tuesday, January 31st. Do we need to go around and introduce ourselves again, or are we good?
I think,
Attendees.
yeah, I think we have the same, what do we have? Yeah, I think we're fine.
Okay. So hi, everyone. Welcome back.
Oh, hey, John.
Hey, John.
Good.
Nice to see you. Okay, so the first thing that we wanted to talk about was just moving forward, which was that we had some conflicts in our proposed schedule that we decided on last time. So we have to go back over that and make sure that we can reconcile some of those problems. So, hi, Susan.
I do have some updates. If that's
Okay.
on that, please. So February 6th, we moved the location because Powers Hall wasn't available. So
Mhm.
that's ours.
Okay.
April 10th is the day before the election, so a lot of the big municipal spaces are set up for the election already. So our recommendation is to move that one. And then April 24th, the league did move their warrant night back to the 24th, so that is also a conflict. So I think best bet is to move those 2 days of dates.
Yeah, sounds fine. So do we all want to,
Yeah, we're at the
Open our calendars and-
27th.
we can figure out some new dates?
So new dates for the 10th and the 24th?
Yeah.
Is that
April
right?
April
Yeah.
10th and April 24th.
Okay.
right.
So April 3rd with that.
April 3rd would be okay, except that we have a meeting the week before. So,
Right.
I mean,
Just
that's
a week.
fine, but there's only a week in between.
Do we need more than a week, do you think?
We're just getting condensed. so
Well,
don't-
I mean,
We
the
wanna-
April 3rd would be the public hearing, so it's not like,
Yeah, I
would
mean,
be-
it's just that if we only do if we're finalizing the draft recommendations on the 27th, is that enough time to get the draft out in order for people to give us feedback on it? I don't know. I mean,
the hiccup too is the 17th is vacation week.
Yes.
Right.
yeah,
So it is
so
like-
probably
So that's why-
better to do it sooner than,
Yeah, so I would
later, I
do
would
the
think.
3rd and then that works.
is
That
everyone?
works for you.
I can't hear you.
The 3rd,
April 3rd, can you do that? We have to move the meeting from the 10th. So the week after that is vacation week, so we were thinking to move it closer to the 3rd.
Okay, I have a conflict, but it's okay. These are, see,
Or
these
could
are still
we-
Mondays.
Could we do it April 12th, just that Wednesday instead of the Monday?
We have a select board meeting.
yeah, we do.
that night.
Oh, right, because then it's the election. So
And then the 24th, then if we go to that, what's that's the league night.
Yeah.
Do we have a meeting on the 25th
so can we, or the 26th,
or the 26th?
we just swap with the warrant meeting?
We do have select board on the 25th.
I don't have that on my calendar.
I wouldn't.
Is that just too far out? Whoops. So can we swap
So
it
the
to the 26th?
26th?
26th is library fundraiser,
Oh, it is. I
That's
have
right,
that
it was
down.
vacation.
Yes,
board
okay.
meetings. You don't want to mess with that one.
No, that's right. We're all there.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to do the week prior, the week of April.
The week prior
But
is
that's-
school vacation
that's
week.
School
Yeah,
vacation
we-
week.
I think that's why we're trying to avoid that.
I mean, it doesn't affect me. I work more, so.
The first? No, that's town
Town
meeting.
meeting.
Never mind.
Ooh,
Well, and
What about
Also-
Thursdays?
we were sort of hoping to be done before town meetings so that we could make use of that.
What time-
Study.
What time is your select board meeting? Because we could do it before the select board meeting, just be here.
6.
Right, so what if we just did it a little earlier that day?
Are people available? or
5
not?
o'clock?
5 o'clock on the 25th, is that what we're talking about?
Mhm.
I mean, do you think we need more than an hour?
No. If we do, we can always move this as we get instead of trying to do it all tonight, right? Why don't we pencil in the 25th, and then if something happens, we can add a meeting or,
RRC?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's open now, so I have it open, so April 25th.
we should have it here so it can go up.
Yeah.
And what time are we talking about for the 3rd, April 3rd?
I think that has to be at 6:30 because of the
6:30.
public hearing.
Okay,
Do those
Okay.
changes work for everyone?
I can't make the 3rd, but don't let that stop. Don't let that stop the majority.
There you go. All right,
All right, super.
Um,
all right, discuss inventory of the town assets for potential active recreation use. And that's Stacy,
Yes.
let's do it.
From anyone? It's up to- Mhm. So these are all the locations. And it's not, it may not be a complete list, but these are the locations that I'm aware of and that I found on the maps. And I divided them up into schools because those are obviously the hardest to put anything at or move things around. And then parks, field and facilities is underneath that. And then lastly is DCR owned. For each site, I went to Google Earth to get the square footage. So this is, it's not perfect.
You can measure it.
I measured it on Google Earth. So those are the spaces for each site. And then for the 4 to 5-ish options that we're looking at, skate park, pickleball court, 100% accessible playground, a dog park for a large dog park, and then a dog park for a small dog park.
Aren't we looking at more than just a dog park?
Sorry,
I thought we were looking at leash areas anywhere in town.
Well, I think that's what I meant by like a large off-leash area. But something ideally that would be fenced in and not like on a playing field
In addition to, or
in addition to what we already have.
But in addition to a small dog park, because from what I'm hearing, it seems like, and it could be something that comes up in the public comment next
Mhm.
time, but it sounds like there's more of a clarification that it actually was a larger off leash that was coming through from an interest in, it's not the smaller dog parks that is a.
So that-
So I'm just clarifying whether we're looking at both.
So
or
I
one.
put on both because we did get some feedback
Okay.
in Park and Rec for the smaller areas, but then at our last meeting, we got some feedback that there was more interest in a larger off leash. So I put this in there just so we could see what kind of areas we're looking at. So none of these are set in stone. These are just some of the feedbacks that we've gotten. I left a column for other in case I'm unaware of something, but and the sizes are obviously all variable, but these are your average square feet for a skate park. I mean, a skate park could be acres, but many of them are around 12,000 square feet. Pickleball court is roughly 7,500 square feet. That's for like 4 courts.
okay,
An accessible playground that can go all over the place, but the median was about 3,000. And then the dog parks are done on acres, so a smaller one is usually about half an acre up to 2 acres. And then something with real running room, sort of like an off-leash type space is more like 3 to 5 acres. And so when I did the square footage for Google Earth, it was like the overall size. So it wasn't like trying to, like at Cricket, you could put something here and here and here and here, but I looked the overall size of the space. And I also added what we have as current amenities at these places. So this is like a pretty broad overview. And there's a few on there that I was like, huh, what's that?
Hmm.
When I was looking at the map, like, Charles River Park, which is really just the space kind of to the right of the reservoir and behind PSAB, it is entirely wooded. So probably not the best space of something, but it is an open space.
Stacy, when you said pickleball court, are you saying 4 pickleball courts?
Somewhere, so the
Was it
75 was the average between 2 courts or 4 courts. So that was the sort of median of that. Depending on where you put it, you could add or subtract to fit it in where you need to.
So just to clarify, so your square footage estimate, again, it's just an estimate, doesn't take in, it doesn't exclude the amenities that are already there. So we would have to still look at each one to say, well, it's 11,000 square feet, but it's completely full. So
Right, but there's a diamond, there's a rectangle, and I did that on purpose because, you know, from Park and Rec, we're looking through an equity lens at all of our spaces, all of our field spaces. Just make sure that we have the right amount of rectangles, the right amount of diamonds, the right amount of softball diamonds, the right amount of baseball diamonds, and things of that nature. So that's why I did the sort of broader overview. I can dial down if this group wants on exactly how much space is taken up, say, a cricket field by both of those multi-purpose fields, and then what space is left.
I think if you split it there, just a couple of things, this is great, thank you. I just think a couple of things, I agree with that. And then also, if there was a way to have like constraints shown, for example, Susan Williams, you're not gonna say there, you know, brand new, redone, you know, something really that would be very difficult to touch, or Greens Field, just redid the playground, so that's kind of off limits. So some type of qualifier, but then other, you might say, Claxton, you know, going to be redone in 2 years and issue with X, Y, and Z there. I don't know if there's a way to rank it, kind of distilled a little more, so we have a
Absolutely.
better understanding of what's kind of off the table, on the
Available.
table, and somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
think it's the middle we want to look at.
And along those lines too, like some of the conservation restrictions
Yes.
that we're facing at,
Mhm.
like the Fazio and different corners of that complex.
Absolutely. There's conservation and zoning restrictions on
So-
almost all of our fields and spaces. So yeah, I can sort of dial this down even further. This is, you know, a fairly large.
No, it's great.
Yeah, yeah, but great.
Mhm.
Place to start.
And like, you know, to your point, Matt, for the schools, it'll be very hard to do anything or make any changes unless we're doing an overhaul with the schools.
Yep.
But I did want to include what we have and what those spaces look like.
For example, Dwight Field, like, I'd just be curious what does the commission feel about Dwight Field and its use and its viability right now? Is it, you know, just some of that color to it?
Well, I won't speak for the commission, but I can tell you that the only group that permits Whitefield is Little League Baseball. And it is one of our smaller diamonds, so it tends to be the little guys.
Okay.
That and like Perry Park also has a
Yes.
small diamond, so that's the same rough size.
And lastly, it'd be nice to have a jurisdiction too added to it. You know, we're all one town. It's just nice to know who.
That
we
might
need to-
cracks me up every time.
we need to get permission. For example, us, the Memorial Park,
Mhm,
you guys.
mhm. One of the other things I didn't put on here, but it might come into play significantly with the new things is parking availability. And so I could go back and add a column for like, what does the parking look like? Is it street parking? Are there 20 spaces? Are there no spaces? You know, that kind of thing, because I think that does factor into what we might put there.
Yeah, that would be great. If that's possible, that would be great.
If you look at the Fazio, since that is also a school site, part of it is a school site.
Yes,
don't
the
know.
playground is currently under the school's jurisdiction.
So that would impact parking and anything else we would do there, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And the chances of the school are probably slim to none, but it's a consideration.
Wait, the playground, the Totla?
The tot lot
Is
is
under the school?
is currently under the school jurisdiction, and so, as many of you may know,
Doesn't-
we are going to CPC to do that playground.
Yeah.
And I did reach out to the superintendent to just say, like, is it okay if we do this? The answer is yes, of course. The answer was go for it.
Yeah.
But
It's really
there are,
interesting. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know.
Yeah, why would you?
of all the
Yeah, oh, yeah,
maps
yeah.
in town, DeFazio's the most interesting, the way it breaks
Yes.
down.
Yeah. We traded parcels or negotiated parcels about 4 or 5 years ago.
Mhm.
at that town meeting.
Okay.
So that is the basic overview, and then what follows is pictures from Google Earth of like the locations of where all these spaces are. Sorry, not Google Earth, but just Google Maps. So for people, because for me, like Colton Park, Hatfield Park, Noise Park, those ones are not, unless you live in that neighborhood, you may not know where they are, so there's maps of all of this.
Well, they're kind of in the middle of the road too, right?
They are, but I do get frequent requests to turn them into something, despite the fact that there's significant traffic and no parking.
Some of those are held in some restrictions though as well,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I think Hatfield Park. 'cause I lived right
Thorpe
there, I
is the
think.
one that I get the most requests on.
Mm.
Anything from a dog park to bocce courts to,
Bocce court.
yes, that was, yes.
That's probably the biggest one, right? Isn't Thorpe the biggest? The other one is.
No, the
one that's
Hatfield
on,
one
like,
is
Oh, yeah,
probably
I think
square
Hatfield is
footage
probably
is.
bigger,
Triangle
yeah.
Park is probably, which one are you thinking?
It's so fun to learn the names of these parks.
Oh, yeah, I know where they are and don't know
Yeah,
the
what they're
names
called,
until
yeah.
this. Well, Colton's easy because at least that's what it's called.
Yeah,
In the
it's
street.
on the street, right? Which one
But
is
it's
that?
not very big, you know, it's.
No.
like-
No, but I at least know the name of the park because that's the street, whereas
Yeah,
this
and
one,
A lot of
Hatfield,
these,
I've
yeah,
like-
Colton is 25,000 square feet, roughly. Noise is 6,000, so that's the smallest, and Hatfield is 20.
Where's Noise?
What about the parcel that's on the end of
I would never call
Harris
that park.
Avenue and Great Plain?
Say that again?
There's a parcel of land on the end of Harris Avenue and Great Plain
Oh,
Avenue.
yeah, yeah.
It's like a wood lot.
Well,
Yeah.
there are a few trees, but there's also like a bench and a.
Is that
walking
Vesta?
path
No,
for it.
no.
Yes, I
That's
think it
where the
is.
school,
And
the-
I think it's just
Emery
basically a
Grader.
dog leg as you take a left off of Harris onto Great Plain. It's
Yeah.
just basically an old wood lot right there, but the town does own that little peninsula of property.
Mhm.
It is true.
Oh,
It
yes,
used-
I know what
It
you're
used to
talking
be
about.
part of the school
Across
department
from
property.
Hazel's.
It did,
And
yep.
then
Yeah,
they
oh,
turned
I
it
know.
back to the-
Across from Hazel's, there's that
Hazel's,
little trucks are parked
Oh.
there, yeah, there's,
Oh,
we
I
looked
was
at
thinking
that
you were talking
for,
about the other end.
we
of
looked at that
Paris.
for something.
I don't
No,
think it would
it's-
be a
it's-
skate park location.
Well, it's not
Right.
directly across, it's on the other side of the, it's a big piece of property.
Mm.
It's got a lot of trees, it looks like woods, there's a brook that goes through it.
Is it near
would-
Hazels?
Yes.
It's across,
Oh,
it's
the other
actually
side of the
bigger than you
street.
think it is.
It's on the north side of the Harris
Mm.
Avenue.
There is, no, that's the median between this thing right here,
Yeah.
just empty.
But I
It
think
has a
that's what
parcel
we're
number
talking about.
to it.
There's water there, and it's also topography, it dips down pretty significant.
It'd be a great place for a dog.
Yeah.
So
So
that,
that,
see
That,
that's
that
where
spot
they-
right there.
that
Yeah.
is, yeah.
That's it.
How large is it?
It looks bigger than I thought it did.
No, It's bigger than you think it is.
Yeah.
We looked at it. for-
But while you're on the
Would we need to
view,
knock
if you go
down the
down
tree?
to the
Oh,
other
if you make
end
it a
of
dog park,
Paris,
you just have to make trails.
where it meets that
There's some
Vesta
Vesta,
Park,
yeah.
that's,
But does that
That's
eliminate the
also an
running
open
potential that
space.
you're
yeah,
talking about?
that one I have on the list. That
Oh, you
one's
do?
Vesta.
Well, you could have someplace else where they could run.
That one
but,
has
you know,
14.
Okay, no, I'm just
So those
asking
are
like,
good.
space, yeah,
oh, yes.
because you know the most
You
about
could
that.
Have them off leash.
If
they
you
could
go to
run through trails
Melrose and
stuff.
Ellicott Street, I don't know if that's on the list, but that's a potential option that we mow and we maintain, but it's not really a great topography site as trees, but for me, I think it'd be a great neighborhood off the dog park without fencing, come as you come.
Is it the
Is that
Hatfield?
Hatfield?
Is that Hatfield?
I honestly, I don't
Oh,
know.
I think that is-
Oh,
yes.
that's pretty-
Yes, that's,
might
no,
be
I just
called-
learned that it was Hatfield
Yeah,
Yeah.
with this map.
There's also,
Yeah.
there's also a park
that's,
that's smaller than Hatfield, that's next to Perry Park.
Beaufort.
Yeah, there's an island. there.
Yes,
Called-
Yeah, it's like a big island, right?
Melrose and Ellicott, the Hatfield Park has some space to it for people to gather. Again, it's not really a spot where the kids play because it's not really an even mowing
Okay.
spot.
Mm.
There's rock outcroppings, and there's trees, and it's very centrally located.
Kids do play there a lot though,
Well, yeah.
actually,
I
like,
mean,
I'm
Yeah.
sure they do. I'm sure,
Yeah.
as well they do with Thorpe Park.
Yeah.
I don't think you see that as
Thorpe
at
less.
Noyes Park, that's more historical, but
yeah, I think they
Just
play
an
more
option.
there than we would at Thorpe Park, just because Thorpe is like, it's so busy, there's not as much
Hmm.
attractive, but in terms of the dog park, I think, I don't know how everyone else is looking at it, but in my opinion, figuring out where we have the opportunity to put structures that require specific parameters versus a dog park that we can look at a number of different places for with those kinds of wish list, I don't want to say wish list, but like, you'd like this, this and this, like, there are a lot of opportunities for that. And I think that can be done in conjunction with whatever projects we end up doing, but we have to figure out those projects first. So those might be the more important things to determine in advance and then connect what we can do with regards to dogs.
So try to fit in the big pieces and then the small pieces.
Well, I think like dog park can go a lot of different places, where skate park and pickleball court have much stricter limitations. So I think before we discuss where something that could be done, you know what I mean? Like, let's figure out the hardest pieces first.
The most immovable.
Yeah, and then even while those projects are going on, we can figure out the dog park, right? I'm not saying like,
Mhm.
it's not like, oh, well, we push dog park down the road 6 years because we're doing these other things first. I think we just need to figure out where these things go and when. And then determine that piece of it.
I would, oh, yeah.
Yeah. that's right, yeah.
Nice try, Eddie.
Thanks, Dave. I would agree with that thought, absolutely, and I think, I don't want to speak for Stacy, but I would say that monies that we're asking for, the design fund monies for the playground improvements at the Fazio, one of your thoughts, we haven't really got there yet, but one of the thoughts was to make an accessible playground improvement, as well as maybe have a leashed-in dog park to that site, because again, DeFazio Memorial have no dogs, but inevitably people bring dogs to large sporting events, so having that as an amenity as part of the playground redesign. Again, I agree, dog parks can be built into other projects. Let's think about projects and then we can fold in probably a lot of different things, accessibility, all these other different aspects. That'd be great.
So if we look at, let's say, the skate park, and we're not gonna rank anything tonight, I'm hoping out of the public hearing, we can, after that, rank things as far as priority, but it would be nice, and I know we talked about desired amenities, I'm sorry, asset requirements. How can we come up with, okay, parking, this is a heavy parking intense use, while pickleball court kind of cycles through quicker and maybe isn't used at certain times of the day. I'm just trying to get my head around of those impacts to neighborhood, let's say noise, maybe skate parks are much noisier than pickleball. People complain about the click, click, click of pickleball. So it would just be nice to have some type of ranking. And I don't know what those, parking would probably know better, what those criteria would be when you look at spaces.
So I can speak to the parking.
Yeah,
ones a
with
little
parking,
bit.
for example, yeah.
So for the skate park, well, there won't be nobody driving to this. More often, it'll be kids biking, skating, whatever, getting themselves there. So there'll be less car usage, not entirely none, especially on the weekends, but during the week, definitely less.
Okay.
Pickleball courts, so far what we've found is they play more often in the mornings and less often in the afternoon. So say if it was a mixed use
That's what I meant,
place,
okay.
the parking may not be an issue during the day, and then they would sort of vacate, and then whoever's using the same facility at night or the afternoons, then the parking, there wouldn't be any overlap on the parking. Playgrounds, if it is 100% accessible, there is going to be a need for parking and very specific parking. It cannot be street parking, because if you try to get a wheelchair out of the back of your van, you cannot have end-to-end parking. So slanted parking or actual parking lot is what would be needed there.
Mhm.
Dog parks, it would really depend on location, although the larger the park, the more people will come. And not just residents, just everywhere. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever been to the park by the old Medfield State Hospital, I'm sorry, Rentham State Hospital. It's huge, but it is very busy and there's cars everywhere. That's a big space. It's a good one.
It sounds like what would be helpful is an updated one of these with kind of more context for the sites, but then a separate chart by,
Needs parking, needs.
by
Mhm.
use of
Right.
time of day, parking,
Yes.
noise. To give more
Yes.
context on,
That's right.
context on the use.
That's
Okay.
right.
So
Also,
we can
like
work on that.
location restrictions, like I would think you could put, I'm making this up, but I'm assuming you could put pickleball farther outside of the center of town because adults will drive for pickleball, whereas a skate park, you would want kids
You
to
want
be
it-
able to bike or walk there or somehow get
Right,
there
and you
easily.
want to make sure that there's like sidewalks
Right,
available
right,
for
right.
that
So
kind of thing.
those kind of restrictions that I'm.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
You
Isn't the
identified,
elephant in the room, the Hillside School site? There's no plans for it post a year, next spring of 24, when school administration moves back to Emory Grover. It's not in the school master plan to be used. It's a big site, tear down possibilities, there's parking, there's all kinds
It's
of
a good
things.
location.
I just wonder why there isn't, it's more not, why isn't it more prominent in this? Because I
Contaminated
think it's-
soils.
Yeah.
I mean, I live on the
Yeah.
back of the
Yeah.
plumes, so we know that that site is compromised, and you're right, it is a good
But
site
it's
to do a
it's
lot of
safe.
things,
It's a
but,
safe site. It's
but
not-
we wouldn't be able to move earth there.
Do we know
We
that?
wouldn't be able to
Yeah,
move
we wouldn't be
earth.
able to.
The school-
We'd have
Get in the DEP process,
Yeah,
I
but then
believe.
would, I mean, I just think that, to me.
No, it's a good point. I think it's,
It's the elephant in the room as far as
That's
it's
a good point.
space and
Yeah.
not used for,
Yeah.
there's no plans for that.
and if you do concrete, for example, for some type of skate park, you probably would cap with some of that maybe any, like there might be something that would
For
do.
pickle or all
Yeah.
kinds of things
Yeah.
like that. I would think that it would just,
Yeah.
to me, it seems to be the bigger discussion than just
Got it.
how you have it here, because I don't think it's,
Mhm.
here it's sort of being reflected, it's an active school that's gonna be continuing to be used as an active school, and that's not the case.
Yeah, but I think that's why we're discussing this, is to.
Yeah,
like
but it's
these
not,
points.
I don't think it's accurately reflected its potential and its time and its use, because it's not a school anymore. So that's, I'm throwing that out. To me, that seems like that's our space that could be.
And it's fenced in.
Yep, there's,
But public, I was gonna say, public concern could come up too. We were there the early 90s, when all the kids had to move, including my two sons. I know they had the ventilation system in the school. But I think with that situation that there could be some public concern.
but there's people working and working there today. There's
It's
no,
outside.
yeah.
We've had kids playing on those playgrounds for 25 years
Yeah.
with the contaminated soil.
Are you
It's-
talking about leaving the building as is?
I'm thinking maybe you tear some of it down. I don't
No,
know.
right,
I
no,
don't have
no,
a
this is- no.
solution, but I just think there's a lot more possibilities there than people are really.
Be a great rec
Giving
center, I'll
it-
tell you that much.
Thank
Of
you.
course, for
It could be
kids,
all
and
kinds of
place, I mean,
things. All I'm saying is right now, there's no plans for that.
that's a good
It's a
point,
big
John.
site
Good
and there's
point.
no plans for
Right.
that site after a year from
Good
now.
point.
Yeah, well,
So,
fair to call it out.
I
Yeah.
think that's a good point. I think for
Good
me, since I started, it's been offline as far as
Yeah.
park and rec goes.
Yeah.
So it's always been rotating, so it's, it does have a technical end in sight. My concern is when they move back to Emory Grover, is there gonna be some school project that's sort of in the wings where the kids are gonna move there?
so all I was saying is that under the current school master
Yeah.
plan, it has
There's
no
nothing.
use.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's
but I do
fair.
like the rec center idea over there.
Mm,
You
yeah,
only
no
vote.
The land alone too. Be good land for half
Green
these
space.
projects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing to
Yeah.
consider, I think that will come up in our feasibility study is what is the cost of remediating any property to then also build, right? So if we're looking at Hillside, it's a wonderful property, but is it worth knocking down that building for a skate park? Like I could see,
It's gonna cost a fortune. to
Right.
knock down the building and then.
exactly. So then the
But you don't know
ROI
until
on
you
that.
You don't know.
No,
until you
Right.
Well,
start.
you
No,
have
you don't know
to
until
do,
it's
exactly,
studied.
that's what I'm saying, like in a feasibility study, we would figure that out, but the point is, that's what I think. In order to be fiscally responsible, we need to say, like, we're building a skate park, but is it worth the expense to make sure that the property is ready to accept the skate park, you know, and same with everything else. So when we're looking at the cost element, I think there might be something that could go on that property that would have a significantly higher return on the investment that we could potentially draw funds from, membership type of potential, like if we're talking about a rec center, then we could get money from that. So anyway, whatever, I'm going
Well, it's
kind
not
of off
mutually
script
exclusive, I
here,
don't
but
think either, so.
yeah.
I was just gonna add that I think it's a great point about Hillside, and I think there'll be a whole conversation about Hillside, just what to do with it, that's separate from this conversation, so not to your point about ranking, like if we have Hillside, if it ends up high in the list of ranking, the users should have other options too, so that Hillside conversation can happen, so that we're not like wagging the tail of the dog, but that it's solidly part of this discussion.
Well, when you look at it, it's got the most potential, because it doesn't have a use, it's got the potential square footage, just looking at, if you're just ranking things by square footage, it's got the most square footage of certainly of any of the school sites, because it's not an operating school, so, so that's what I mean, for square footage wise, it's one of the biggest sites we have.
How about parcel 74? I don't see it on this list, no. That's on Greendale Avenue, big piece.
Edge of the
Why would you
highway.
know?
Oh my
Yeah, I don't think Stacy was around for those.
God.
discussions.
I don't know, it's kind of a hot button issue. I don't, let me look at my map. It's
Yeah,
on Green.
Great Heights.
Oh my gosh, now my eyes.
I know, green.
It's by this yellow,
And how do you know
There.
what person?
no, that's just what it's called. I'm not that, I'm
It
not
makes
that
it sound
smart.
like
There's no
some
mystery
weird,
to it,
like,
yeah.
mystery, right?
Yeah, and it's that yellow piece.
Along the
This right
highway
here,
edge.
along the highway.
Yeah.
So it's
Yes,
the one that abuts
Right.
Cutler.
It
yes.
has a
Not the
really
Kendrick, the other one.
big
It's
slope.
Madeira.
Because
It's
you go to-
sloped,
I know.
yep.
So right here.
The
It
M
might be
one.
useless, but I know there's flat.
Sorry,
areas.
I live right there too, by the way.
Okay.
See how it sort of like touches Cutler.
It's where the
There's
mountain
one up
bikers
there.
bike into
Yeah,
Cutler
and that
from there.
Cutler Lake one, I think is
Yep.
a little more,
It's sort of like right behind the church.
just would like to get some more information. That might be
Yeah.
a zero.
Yeah.
The other thing on, again, ranking. And again, I don't know the answers, like if you're looking at Mills Field. It has play tennis there, and I know the youth diamond. But the basketball court, is that heavily used? Is the playground heavily used? Is there a way to find in this when you look at it, and you've probably done this and say, you know what? X has a diamond there, but it's never used, or X is a playground, but no one goes to it.
So specifically, I can do that for all of them. I don't know very many of our playgrounds that are not.
Oh, forget the
used.
playgrounds, but like a basketball court, I'm just
Basketball
wondering
court, so
what.
the one at Mills is
Yeah.
not heavily used by basketball players,
Okay,
but it is used by toddlers on push type toys. Much like the one at Perry Park. Perry Park is used more for basketball, but if you've ever driven by there, and poor Eddie every couple of months has to go through and clean up all the
Straighten up all
buggies.
Yeah.
And the other push toys that people drop off and take them away because they get dropped there. So the the courts that I use the most often for basketball are Greens and Newman. The rest of them are used sort of as a more multi-use. Now, the basketball courts themselves need an overhaul.
Yeah.
They need to be resurfaced. So would that change the use of them?
can
Potentially.
pickleball go on a basketball court?
Yes. But none of our basketball courts are fenced in. And it is difficult to play pickleball. It's not impossible, but it is difficult without a fence.
So I just want to talk about these multi-use situations where we've got like the pickleball people who want to be there earlier in the morning, and then we've got maybe school kids in the afternoon using whatever, or toddlers in the morning pushing their little trikes around. And hoping that we can kind of extend some of this use later in the evening. So I would have to say that I think the teens would really appreciate if there were lights at a lot of these places, so that after dark falls, they could still play basketball or hang out or whatever. And I think that would like extend the,
Absolutely.
without like a whole overhaul or a whole new facility, I think that could extend the life and really serve
Absolutely.
another user group who was kind of silent in this.
Yeah, and I would
Discussion,
agree
like
100%.
with
None of our
light
basketball courts are lit. That is an issue. Many of our basketball courts are in neighborhoods, so
Yeah.
it would be somewhat difficult between zoning and neighbors to get those lights. But there's all, like, for instance, there's some courts at Newman, which you could potentially light, but it is on school, so then it's just
Right.
another person another group we have to involve. in that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and I hear you about the hour and the neighbors and the zoning, but I wonder if we could also just, look at like putting a cone around the light so that it's a directed.
So the lights that we use
Beam, et
now
cetera.
from Musco have a significantly less spillage.
Yeah.
So they can be directed. I 100% believe in lights in a lot of different facilities, not just for extended use, but for safety. It helps significantly. But the cost of the lights we have now is not insignificant. Like when football uses the lights for a school game, it's $45 an hour to light a field.
Oh,
So
well, those are lights.
those are lights. So depending on what kind of lighting we have, but like all of our athletic field lights, so depending
Yeah.
on what kind of lighting you're looking at, there will be a charge and then,
Yeah.
it would, I think it would be significantly helpful and an asset to the town, but that's just another factor.
I guess,
of
yes, and I
maintenance.
totally hear that. I guess I'm just wondering if we can decrease competition for some of these court uses by
Lighting,
extending the day and making sure that the different use groups have like their slot. You know what I mean?
On paper, yes, but we have lighted turf fields that I cannot get groups to agree on, so.
I understand.
I hear you.
Stacy,
But-
does something click with you or with the commission? That would be an ideal spot for just pickleball courts.
I think we've discussed a few times locations that per our evaluation of all the different properties at our disposal would be ideal for various projects. But again, like my big thing is saying, okay, these are the ones we've identified as ideal. Let's say we have 5 or 6 of them. And then again, doing a feasibility study that looks at the cost of every project on each one to figure out the greatest solution. So for example, like, and not to harp on Hillside, but for an example, like if we were saying this is a great space, it's at our disposal, we can tear it down and then we put something there and then realize, shoot, we've really limited ourselves to what else we can do there because we've taken up this chunk, right? So I think in our conversations, there are a few that we're like, okay, based on what we know we want with a little bit of wiggle room, here are the spaces that would work for pickleball, for a skate park, for, again, like a rec center type of thing. And I think looking at it kind of as the collective, as opposed to each individual project will help us determine whether we're right or not. Do you want to take it away from here? You've got, because you know which ones we're talking about.
I do. I mean, for pickleball itself, I
Yeah.
think with the multi-use, I think Claxton is a decent location because like I said, pickleball users, typically not all of them, some of them play at night, but typically play in the morning. But then the parking lot would empty and then we have our athletic teams from the high school and then our user groups in the evenings, then the parking lot would be available to them. So I think that is one option, certainly.
Can I ask a quick question?
Mhm.
To your lighting question, aren't we doing like a whole field of solar across the street at the DPW? Do we have that? Because if we could use solar to light, then we're talking about defraying costs. Am I making that up? Where do they?
No, we do have that, but that's going already into
We already used that.
lighting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
rebate. Yep, but I understand.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. But to that point, less neighbors.
Yeah.
Less annoyance with the ting, 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 ting. And so I think that's a decent space for it. Mills has some green space. So to
Okay.
add on to where the tennis courts are, could be an option. Again, parking there is not a big deal. It's not heavily used. I mean, on the weekends during baseball season, sure, it's very busy. Outside of that, it's not that busy.
And the basketball court that we discussed, that could be an option if we're fenced in multi-use.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
The
if you
Millsfield
fence,
sounds like a
yeah, if you
great area
fence
for
some of these
extension.
basketball.
Keep the tennis courts as they are
Mhm.
and then add a pickleball courts.
And
But you
and
do have
I've
that
also
great
Do you
seen
mean just
pickleball.
at the lines? Or are you asking? for
No.
actual
No, she's
courts?
taking
Or-
new space.
Yeah, taking new space for pickleball courts.
shared spaces.
And then for the skate park.
The skate park is interesting because yeah, I never think of Hillside first, but that is a clear option, right? It's walkable, it is safe, there's walkways, sidewalks, things like that, so that would be one. Another one that I have considered is Cricket. The building is probably either gonna have to be renovated or turned down, but that is also a walkable, bikeable, skatable type area. You would need additional parking or more defined parking over there. And with a site like Cricket, those neighbors are very local. They, you know, every weekend or weeknight, it gets super busy there, so to add another amenity, but, you know, trying to think about something where the kids, first skate park in particular, where between the middle schools and the high school, what is walkable? Or how can they get there safely, not in a car? You know, one of the things that I always am like, Ridge Hill is this beautiful giant space, but we can't get kids there on their own.
It's all conservation land too. so.
There's a ton of
But even if it
conservation,
weren't,
land, there's a lot of
It's wet.
restrictions, it's very wet. People always like, but what about this, what about this, so like, but again, we can't get kids there safely. And, you know, if we're gonna put in a facility, I wanna make sure that if kids are gonna be drawn to it, which ideally is what we're doing, they can get there safely. So I think that is a big factor.
Okay, so it sounds like what we need to know is a bunch more criteria on,
Columns.
bunch more columns. We need
Yep.
to add columns to this chart. Maybe the leftover available area or the space excluding the amenities that is listed, parking, whether there's lights.
Would it make sense to just remove anything that we think is out of the question for these projects that we are looking at? Like, we're not gonna put a skate park or pickleball course at Broad Meadow, for example, you know what I mean? So it'd be like, okay, well,
Right.
let's
Yeah, I
wipe,
can,
Right, I mean, if we're all in agreement that, with the exception of Hillside,
right,
Yep,
that the schools are kind of off the table, then that
Well,
limits.
that's not really true because you have the Pollard tennis courts.
Yeah. exactly.
And,
Great pickleball
you
sport.
know,
okay, so we could go
but
through,
would
I
we
guess.
build more pickleball there?
So Broad Meadow, Elliott, I'd say no, right? Sorry if I'm, and then you can correct me. High Rock. I always thought that was underutilized. Could we just leave that on? Or is it, you think that's,
Well, I guess the question is, what are we gonna do with High Rock as these school projects come? So I think, I don't think it's a good idea to leave it in.
okay?
Yeah.
Is
Maybe we
it,
prioritize high, medium, low as to the likelihood of these being eligible spots.
yeah, that's
for
probably
pretty
a
much
better way to
all
do
of
it.
them.
Yep,
I like that.
Yeah.
And I might move Hillside out of schools,
Mhm.
since to
To your
John's
point,
point,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
that
not-
it's
Well,
not
why-
actually.
why don't we do the
still
same
under
for
their jurisdiction, so you can't.
yeah. So
Well,
would-
'cause the
would-
question-
Well,
how
this
long
is
is
gonna
it?
be a long. time,
Yeah.
so.
And it may continue to be a school, a swing space for everybody to like.
so, I'm sorry, so Mitchell, I think that's probably low to have something done there. What's gonna go on? High school, there's a discussion of expanding the tennis courts there, am I right?
That's
We're doing
currently in our
something.
design process.
So
It
that's,
designs out
that
to
would be
bid.
a possibility,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, right?
Mhm.
Newman, I think that's a possibility with the tennis courts there. Right, to do something, would you say, or you think that's? Yeah, pickleball and.
Is there room to build at Newman? Expand?
No, but I think that you could convert maybe those tennis courts to pickleball if you wanted to.
Sure, but I think that's a different question than what we're discussing now, right? Or not?
Well, no, I'm discussing whether or not these are viable sites for any of these.
We would just cross them off. Which
I
ones
think
can
the
we do?
challenge with Newman is that you can't use the courts during school hours, so it limits the use. So adding pickleball when you can't
Okay,
use them. would be
Similar to
the
Pollard.
best.
During their
Yeah.
time, primary.
But
Yeah.
school's only 180 days of the year too, so.
I just would think that the pickleball groups would find that
That's a lot of
frustrating if we're
days.
adding new space to where there's so much constraint.
And you're in school most of the winter, you know? So when it's nice out, they're not in school.
So that's another
Summer.
question.
I was,
Why do pickleball courts not? If we build new pickleball courts, can they be used year round?
That's a different
So
question.
yes,
Okay, I
Right,
guess I
so-
stepped on that one.
Yeah.
I loyally read all the comments that were sent to me.
No.
Slippery court's a good court. Yeah, I think that was the comment.
So the
Or what
overall,
court?
so I can give you the broad overview on outdoor courts. We typically close them, protect the surfacing, the netting, the posts, all of that because of the freeze thaw.
It gets dark.
And
It, like-
because when they're not locked, people sometimes take liberties to shovel them or salt them.
I gotcha.
And then that affects,
That makes
so
sense.
that's why we close our courts.
I just wanted to
And if we
understand.
had true pickleball courts, we would do the same.
Okay, I just wanted to understand that.
Also, Matt, not to harp on the
No.
Newman piece, but I think that that's something that has been discussed, like which courts can we expand to allow pickleball use? I think that's different than the conversation we're having here in terms of like what things we want to build and add, because in terms of like an investment to turn the tennis courts and allow pickleball use, like it's really nominal, like.
Well, right, but if we end up allowing pickleball use at X, Y,
Then
Z,
we don't
then we
wanna
don't need to build.
Build another, is what you're
Right.
saying.
You know,
Okay, that makes,
Or we could add tennis back at the high school because we decided to change.
I see what you're saying. Okay,
So-
sorry. Yep.
No, that's fine.
And Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, the Newman courts, right, all around them, it drops right down, right? There's not
Yeah, they're
a
elevated.
real, they're sort of slightly elevated.
Yeah,
And
they're
there's
kind
no,
of
like-
perched in the floodplain there.
Yeah,
but-
so there's not like, you
but
couldn't
it'd
just
be a
like
great
slap
place for
another court.
pickleball. You could put lights that shine down on the courts and you could sell that prolonged season. So again, I think it goes back to, I wouldn't rule out anything. I think we prioritize and we think about limitations and. as
Well, and
we-
get some public.
Yes, that's what yeah.
input in the next-
I mean, I know nobody wants lights, but again, I could see
That's
new wave lighting that would not impact the neighbors that respectively live on Great Plain Avenue.
Mhm.
And I could see it being a great night spot for people to play or, again, permitted during certain hours because of the limitations of the school.
Mhm.
Are we ruling out an indoor recreation complex in Needham?
I personally, no, never.
Okay.
But
So
part of this,
But that's not part of this.
that's not part of the charge of this committee.
Although possibly something to keep in the back of our minds when we are assessing different spaces, so that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot by using a good space that could be
Yeah.
ideal for a rec center.
So we took Newman and Pollard and had those kind of possibilities, then Snooty Williams, can we
Yeah.
agree that that's off the table? Okay.
Are there other options that come to your mind for the skate park that aren't Hillside or Cricket?
I think Claxton. has to be
Claxton,
on
I've heard of
the
good things, yeah, to do.
Okay,
So
Just the
space wise, yes, Claxton's a big one. It's the sidewalk.
location,
It's
right?
location.
The
So-
only negative of knowing nothing
Mhm.
about the details. The
Mhm.
negative to me that comes to mind is location.
Location and walkable.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Would be opposed to a skate park in an elementary school. I think of Elliott, and that playground needs to be renovated, that field needs to be renovated. It's in our 5-year capital plan for design and engineering work there.
Well,
You
that
could do an
field's never
accessible
gonna be-
playground, you could do an artificial turf field, you could do a bowl with the skate park. You have the parking, and it would be part of that design, and you could build up all, like we talked about, trying to utilize what we have in our plan and just embellish upon that to hit a lot of goals. And I think you can accomplish all three of those right there.
Mhm.
And you have a little bit of room. If you look at that parcel on the Google, we own beyond the baseball diamond fencing all the way to the contractor that has the construction yard that abuts us there at that school grounds. And again, it's a school grounds jurisdiction, but the school is amenable to the playground improvements, the field improvements. They know that they have too small of a field footprint for natural grass to really be successful. So the kids unfortunately have a pretty much a mudded field like you can see right there in the Google
Right
Earth.
now,
Yeah, it just doesn't sustain the population. So again, that could be a safe, accessible turf field that had an accessible playground that was put in place, as well as a new basketball court and a skate park right there, and I think accomplish many goals in that. And if you looked at the parcel map on Needham's GIS layer, you could see that we own a lot of that wood line, and you could actually build
On the
out,
side of it.
yes, that's
Mhm.
correct. And you could probably accomplish many goals with that plan.
We turned down the building.
So the
Just-
one just far away.
Yeah, that was the only thing.
Understood, I just wanted to throw out a
Yeah.
couple ideas.
I'm sorry, what's
Great
your
one. Just
Far.
it's
Far
far
away
from
from
town.
people.
Oh, far from town.
Just
Except
central,
for
like
Elliott.
central.
Understood.
It's a great idea, but it's just a lot.
Yeah, no. It's a good option to think about.
Mhm. Although not much further from Cricket, if Cricket's an option, right? I mean, it's further, but it's not.
In terms of the school master plans, and was there not, and maybe I'm imagining it, a potential of increasing the size of Elliott by 6 something or other classrooms, whatever? Like, so the question is, are we going to need to think about that if we're looking at the Elliott site?
We should, and I'll lean on John because I think he knows the school master plan probably better than anybody, but I wasn't aware of that. But I think for all these projects, that's another consideration that we have to take into mind.
Yeah, I think for
Step on
anything
our
we
own feet.
decide to go near school, we would have to certainly consult the master
Yeah.
plan, talk to the school, look at the
Yeah.
numbers
So
of
it's,
people. moving to-
it's way out on the end of their timeline,
Mhm.
but there's no sighting or anything. It's just a concept that
Mhm.
potentially there'd be a need for more classrooms there.
But just so we're thinking, if we are looking at that site for any of this, potentially where that might end up happening, so that we don't
Well,
then in like.
it's on
6
all
to
of them.
10
I
or
mean,
whatever.
Pollard, for example, is a
Right.
big renovation that
Yeah.
would go well down towards where the tennis courts are.
Yeah.
if Under that plan.
Mhm.
So all the schools are implicated in
Right.
whatever you're doing.
Okay, so we'll update the matrix with more information to help us narrow down. Not sure that we did so much narrowing. We were also gonna hear today from Park and Rec. Oh, no, it's okay, just about some of the feedback that you guys have gotten up to date, just to catch everybody up, because we haven't been on the receiving end of that.
So you mean in general or since the
No, in
posting of this
general, in
group?
general, I guess
Yeah.
I'd be interested in sort of having a profile of some of the major interest groups. I mean, hopefully, we're gonna hear from many more in our public comment. But like, you guys know, well, pickleball players want to play in the morning. They come in their own cars and they're, this, that, and the other thing. I would like to learn some of that, so. if you
So
could sort of
the
just bring that together
three-
for us.
The 3 most passionate groups that have come to Park and Rec. 2 of them have come to the commission multiple times, skate park and pickleball. The 3rd has come to the department, that's the 100% accessible playground. And when I mean by that, when I say 100% accessible, I mean like somebody with mobility issues can get up in the air, so ramp, sensory, everything 100%. So those are the 3 most vocal groups that come to Park and Rec. I know that the select board and the town management hears a lot about the dogs, either off leash or on leash or parks in general. So in order of, I would say the order is pretty true to form on the spreadsheet.
I also think it's with the skate park, it's a group, it's a demographic that does not have a lot of options outside of what we already provide. So pickleball, we've been able to adapt the tennis courts. We've been flexible. There are basketball courts that we could use for pickleball. There are no other options that we've tried to, we've tried to be creative with pop-up skate parks that haven't been that successful. So this isn't, it's a group that is really underrepresented in terms of options in Needham. So when it comes to prioritizing that group relative to other, other opportunities or other activities, that one has rose to the top because it's not something that we've been able to address with the other facilities that we have in Needham. So that's why we've really prioritized it and have tried to identify opportunities and locations for that.
And I think Michelle can speak to this better than I can, but I know that pickleball has been part of the Park and Rec Commission's conversation for a decade, if not more. Without the ability to, so it's not a new influx of people, it has been coming over and over without the ability to give them what they need. And I think from Needham, what's the closest skate park, Dover Sherburne? or
Framingham.
Framingham, depending
Framingham,
on
that's
where
what
you're
happens,
going.
yeah, Framingham's a good-
Yes.
Hyde Park, yeah,
Yeah, so there's
One
nothing,
in
so
Waltham.
it's a decent drive.
yeah, it's a
Right.
decent drive.
It's like the size of this table.
The one
Oh,
that's
so-
so
Waltham
tiny.
is tiny.
Because I think it's interest. So, I mean, it's not just the squeaky wheel syndrome, like the
Yeah, oh,
people
no,
that
there's a
come most
lot.
often. It's a group that doesn't have, there's not a lot of options within Needham for that group to really be able to benefit.
Yeah.
So,
And it's been talked about a lot. Even when I got on the board, we were talking about, it. So it's been X amount of years, so.
Yeah.
But just so we don't reinvent the wheel, kind of to Heidi's point, I know we've said Claxton and Cricket, you discussed with the skate park, now we're talking about Hillside. Any others that you've really zoned in on? Because you guys have the information. We're-
Specifically.
Yeah,
Skate park, the other option size wise, but again, would be DeFazio,
okay,
but there's a lot of buts with DeFazio, no matter what you put there, parking, the amount of capacity that potential, that complex can handle.
Mhm.
I mean, it's constantly busy.
If I could add to that, I'd say too, the implications of the school master plan and the DPW complex master plan
Yes.
also factor in there, so.
fair enough.
Yeah.
But I think those are the
Big ones.
Those are the three
Okay,
space wise that I can, or four. Cricket, Claxton, Hillside, and DeFazio are the four that could, I think, house a skate park.
Don't forget Elliot.
Ellie,
Sorry,
Yes,
Crick-
that was a
Claxton.
Well, we should
Hillside,
consider.
Elliott,
Okay.
DeFazio, and DeFazio.
okay, that's helpful.
That area of DeFazio that is across from the gas tank. That's like kind of a, take care, John. It's kind of a,
Materials laydown area.
yeah,
that is currently, and I apologize, DPW land.
So I think that would be part of the DPW
Mhm.
facility study. In terms of, because it's actively used as part of our DPW operation.
and I apologize. I really have no concept of size. So when you tell me that we need 12,000 square feet for a skate park, I need something to compare that to.
Is that the size of the tot lot?
Is it?
Is it bigger?
Your
The
house
tot
lot,
lot's huge.
a little bigger than your
So you
house
could
lot.
zero in on that field.
Usually
right there.
Definitely bigger than mine.
Usually 10,000
Bottom
square foot
left,
house
bottom
lot.
left, yeah, that
My
field's
house lot
about
is
12,000.
10,000.
Yeah, right.
Ace of Field.
Which is
It's
probably about
Little
average
League
in
Diamond.
the center of town.
That's actually pretty good. That's a good size for a skate park.
12,000.
I mean, that,
Oh.
You're gonna take a small field?
No, no, no.
Yeah,
no. I was just using that. as an
Well, I'm just
example.
wondering.
Seven
Please
poles,
take
watch
that
out.
back.
So the top lot of
Did not say
DeFazio, the
that.
big entire fenced in area,
Yeah.
37,000 square feet.
Well,
So a
so
third of that.
That is
Not to-
deceiving.
not to
Yeah.
get DPW riled up,
That big stuff.
but this is a centrally located area
Yeah.
that has parking that you can't, I mean, it's my
But the-
understanding you can't do anything except cap that off.
The
right?
parking that you see currently across from the gas tank is not parking
No.
for the
Yes, I know.
public.
I know.
And there's
Where is the
no,
gas tank in?
and technically it's not a
That's the-
throughway,
Oh.
so there's no sidewalk, so it comes into the, walkability, so we'd have to factor that into,
Sure,
and the conservation.
right. I'm curious, is it even doable to lay down the concrete on that? Like, if you're not digging, but you're just laying down the concrete, is that a doable thing?
I think that's a conservation question.
Conservation, there is a reason why all of DeFazio is not concrete or asphalt,
Yeah.
because of the stormwater,
Okay.
which
Well,
is
that answers the
No, it
question.
is. Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Lastly, I don't, Avery Field, how used is that in the scheme of things?
it's very much, it's used a
Is
lot.
it used?
Yep.
Okay. Seems to be a
Girls
lot of,
softball is exploding.
okay,
The JV team uses it sometimes for practices, but the youth softball team uses it constantly in the spring.
but if we carved out that softball use 52,000 square feet, is there any extra space there? No.
No, and there's zero parking
Okay,
access.
so someone like
much.
Avery, we could probably put on the low.
There's,
Yeah.
right, there's like
Low.
5 spots
Yeah.
out front.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's just. to
Yeah,
get
it's
some. So it looks like
Yeah, we have a
Claxton,
condo there that's
Mhm.
the most-
Cricket. Is it fair to say that Greens Fields is You're really not gonna do anything to that?
I wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't say that
Matt,
either.
I
Okay.
think that PPBC is throwing out the Stephen Palmer
Oh,
building.
that's right.
Well, we're potentially moving,
Moving and
so
swapping, yeah, yeah,
I'd
yeah.
say
Okay.
Greens is not a great option for us to do much right now, but I
Yeah.
don't think it's.
Well,
off
that's
the table
Stephen
for-
Palmer, that's gonna
Right,
be another
exactly.
discussion. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That answers my question.
Yeah.
Does Perry have space that isn't the diamond and isn't the small lot? In between, like I picture there's
So
like a
there's the-
small diamond and then there's the playground, but it feels like there's a lot of space in
So
between.
there is a rectangle space. It is used by like tot soccer. So
Oh,
like
okay.
it's a small rectangle. It's not used for very much. It is usable. We do permit it.
Is it big enough to put a skate park in?
I think that would be an awkward space for a skate park, and also with it being so
Is
used by
it?
little ones, I think it could also not be the safest
Conflict of
spot.
interest.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
Because
just-
Perry Park, while it
I
is,
just like
it
its
is,
location. for-
it is a 2 to 12 playground. It is also more heavily used by toddlers than it is older kids because of the.
I know, but it wasn't fenced in and I had a runner.
You and me both. I had multiple, they were just not in the same
We're
direction.
talking about humans, not
Yes.
dogs.
Right.
Yes, no, that is also true. You're right.
I mean, Perry Park does have the old foundation of the old school, man.
Yeah, well, it says
Not that I'm trying to
temporarily
get you
closed.
back.
yeah. It says temporarily.
No, it's temporary closed, yeah,
Yeah.
I thought so.
Well, some of that-
Underneath the
But there's a
basketball court.
foundation there.
That's
Is a
that-
basement.
Yeah, there's a
No.
basement, yeah,
When did that
exactly.
close?
Oh, my.
terribly like
Yeah, it's
dangerous and
Yeah.
weird.
Anytime somebody's like, we can just drive over, I'm like, no,
No, you're not doing that.
you're gonna end up in Perry.
You
Rebecca's
could
basement.
dig that out, fill it in, make a skate park bowl there. Again, you got conflict of interest, because Perry Park really is a neighborhood
Neighborhood.
draw. We've all
Yeah.
been there. It's the gathering spot of every young couple in town or even out of town, but it's like the spot to go with kids, so. The
As long as
skaters
you're
and
not
that, I
wrong.
don't know if it'd be the greatest mix.
And we touched on Dwight Field, because that's the one near Newman.
Yes.
Right? Like that, I know there's no parking, but in terms of space and
Dwight's the
location.
one up on the top.
Yeah,
of
up in the hill, yeah.
by
Yeah.
California.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I'm not thinking. I'm
You're
not thinking
talking
Dwight.
Cusick.
Yes, that's the one.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
But Dwight is, is that's just one.
Dwight's a real
Diamond's
pain for
hard to
all the
get to.
reasons.
It's just,
Oh,
it's
same.
been
It's not
that,
close to anything, there's no sidewalk.
You know,
Can we look at Dwight on the map just to show everybody? So Dwight is not only that little league base, the 60-foot baseball field that, as Stacy mentioned, is the tot lot age. It's like one of the youngest programs. So conditions, there aren't the marquee conditions, but
No.
it's a nice, safe space for the kids. But underneath that plateau to that field, where all the trees are there between us and the Charles River Center, the Rugen Center, we own that parcel of land. In fact, years ago,
but it drops, right?
it does drop, but there is space there where the tree grove is that, we had originally entertained an idea of clearing that up, putting a pavilion there so the families could kind of picnic there and make it accessible. And we had ideas to develop that. So I don't want to rule that out because I do believe Park and Rec has the jurisdiction of that parking lot across the street. As mentioned, it's up a hill, it's a tough spot to get to, but it is a nice little spot. And I don't know where our property line is as far as it goes back towards the old East Militia Heights. But there might be room for, again, some potential there in the future.
So you think the town owns that parking lot across the street?
I
Or you
believe
know?
Park and Rec
Yeah, I
has
think
jurisdiction of
we
that
do.
parking lot, yes.
You have jurisdiction over
Because
there.
we've
Yes.
rented that out
It goes
for
out.
people to
People call me
use, and
all
different
the
time about
contractors
that
to
one.
stage and,
Yeah.
yeah, it's in rough shape, but it's,
But it's not bad
Ours.
size.
no, it's
How
good.
heavy
That's
is
what
that?
I'm
You
reacting
can
to
fit
that
about
more.
Yeah.
30
Absolutely,
to
it's
40
got
cars over
Yeah,
That's not
there. So
bad.
my kids used that for, was it T-ball back in the day? Is it
Yeah,
still-
yeah, it
is
was
still
always a
used for that?
T-ball field,
Is
yeah.
it still used really? or is it-
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
What a good memories at that field.
Oh,
Still going.
nightmares.
Yeah. Ah, nightmares. Okay.
Can I ask one question? I don't know if this is something we want to enter into this conversation as we look at spaces, but I know that we have sections of town where we, for example, over on Linden Street, where it might be nice to put something like basketball and pickleball or at the skate park, you know, to think about the different communities that we are trying to work with. And, you know, that might be a space where kids who typically don't have rides and don't have access to things might be able to utilize those spaces. So just something to think about. I don't know if we have spaces over there, but I think it would be good to consider, which is why another reason that Elliott would be a good location, because that is near, again, another section of town where perhaps,
Mhm.
you know. I don't know if I'm saying. it
Similar
all
to
correctly,
Mills. Mills.
but- Yeah, so just.
Well,
just-
High Rock would be Linden, is that what you're saying? That's-
High Rock, but I don't know that area well enough to know if there are any other spaces around there that would be, but anyway,
Yeah,
just
okay.
something to think about as we're considering all of our residents.
Well, I'll
and all
tell
the
you,
different.
that's a good point, because the seabed, is that what they refer to,
Oh, yeah,
that
Seabed's
area?
way,
We've
yeah,
heard
down.
about that through
That's the other
CPC.
side of town.
That's down that way, yes. Are you talking about, yes.
The build out of the future of that with
Oh, the
the
High Rock
state,
home,
and their
yes,
plans for
yeah.
those lands.
Linden
But again,
Chambers.
getting a collaboration in, because at that age, you could probably put some pickleball courts in there as the build out of that project in years to
Yeah.
come, because I do think we're gonna see that in the next 5 years, is that will be a plan for that renovation of that whole area, and maybe a partnership to take advantage of that and work that into our, I don't know if we have any approval process with the state, but
Mhm.
just a thought,
Yeah.
is a central location. And I think at the High Rock School itself, again, we have the four square, the basketball courts there, and there's potential on that.
That's
hardscape
it,
right
that's
there.
what I was at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so. We're gonna update the spreadsheet. And hopefully incorporate some of the asset, some more of the asset requirements into that, so that we can look at it all together. Upcoming, we have the public hearing to be held on Monday, February 6th at 6 p.m. That'll be at Rosemary. And I think we need to just sort of strategize about how we're gonna handle public comment. I think it's obvious that we have some very well-defined user groups who have some very well-defined desires for space. I think a lot of them will come and advocate for their desired choice, but I'd like to make sure that we make room for other choices as well and other voices to be heard, because a lot of these folks have already expressed their comments. So any thoughts about how we open this hearing?
How long are we scheduling the hearing for? An hour and a half?
So we have a meeting right after it. I think it can only be an hour. Don't we meet at
That's an
7?
hour, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The meeting.
That's right, that's the one that- and maybe we can
No, we don't have a
call-
meeting
You don't
that
have a
night.
meeting
We don't have a meeting that
Parks and
night.
Rec doesn't?
No, we're 1327.
Yeah, I know, well, that's what I had to.
13 or
Usually be an
15.
hour and a half to 2.
Yeah, it sure is. Okay, so never mind.
Yeah, okay, so it'll be an hour and a half to 2 typically. And we're
Um,
gonna notify all user groups and
Do you think it's feasible to ask the user groups to sort of appoint a speaker?
I was thinking that if we could say to the major user groups that like
Sort
have
of a
one
stipulation
representative.
to your, we already know.
Yeah.
I mean, not that there could be nuance that we need to hear, but if we could kind of condense the points into one speech.
well, you would have those, so in the past, you've had those user groups identify themselves before the meeting, and then you know who to call on right away. And then you say, for the members of the public, they can just come up and say ditto to that, or I'm gonna add to that, right? Yes, but we kind of understand where you're coming from. And then after that, you say, is there anyone else in the audience that we really haven't heard from yet? Now's your time, so. But yeah, if they identify themselves prior, and then that way, Heidi, you can call, and we can call and say, so-and-so wishes to speak. Agenda, and then move to the public.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the dog representation will be there, as far as you know. Yes,
Yeah, as far as I know.
yes, so
Yeah.
You'll be
I think we
in there with
know,
a group.
yes, yes.
Just so I'm hearing you correctly, are you saying have people sign up, like, tell us over email before that date, or?
Yeah,
when
they don't
come
have
in
to, but it'll be
before?
nice, when they come in the room, like town meeting, you
Yeah.
come in the room, you go to the moderator, you're like, can you please recognize me, you know, they get up and they usually have prepared remarks.
Right.
I just think it's a good way to get them to start off so that other people can say, my voice has been heard, or they forgot to say X, Y, and Z, just for a minute, say, oh, and by the way, we want a central location. That wasn't mentioned.
And maybe say like, please, if you've already heard your point made.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
You
Yeah.
don't need to make it again.
Yeah.
Just
Limit,
two
limit
minutes.
comments to,
Try to
2
keep it
minutes.
to like 5 minutes, 3 minutes.
It's usually 2 or 3. Yeah.
Because it would be
Especially
interesting
longer
to
than you
hear
think.
from groups, if there are groups that you haven't heard.
Mhm,
from.
Yes.
mhm.
So I've never heard from the accessibility group, so it'd be nice to hear from them.
I
I
met
know
with the
you've had-
feedback group this past week.
Hmm.
Right, and I just heard, I sent you the email, I think, about someone who had the idea for sort of like a hangout spot for teen girls specifically.
Hmm.
Not that it would be exclusively for teen girls, but a lot of our recreational activities are skewed towards boys and sports. And so there was a question of whether or not we give these roving packs of girls who want a place to hang out. A lot of them are hanging out on the playgrounds, but the playgrounds are built for little people, but they're not used at night. So that's why they're there, but maybe, and so I'm just saying, I hadn't heard that before. So I think that there are other interests and I just want to,
Like a teen cafe.
something.
Well, spoken as a young dad of a daughter, just make sure it's near the police station. This place where the young girls are gonna hang out. That's all. Central location. close.
Right.
Lighted.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had to leave that. No, that'd be pretty cool.
yeah. it would
But
be.
so I think that there are folks who haven't spoken up yet, and so it would be nice if we could make room for them.
Yeah,
or
I think it's great.
invite them.
All right. You good, Heidi?
I think so, yeah.
All right.
Anybody else have
Anybody
anything?
else? Want to move to adjourn? Is there a motion? Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Have a great night.